So guys, we don't want to delay too much, but I want to welcome everybody to the VX1 winter webinar here. My name is Brian Hayes. I'm going to be helping Mike out a little bit. We're going to use his all his smarts and all of his cool presentation material. And but I just wanted to take a few minutes and welcome everybody to the webinar. Introduce Mike a little bit. If y'all don't know who he is, you haven't been to the VX1 website. But Mike, with Madeline and Joanne last year, won the 2019 NACs up in Newport. Recently, just with Hayden, won the 2020 Midwinters down in Florida. And you know, as if that wasn't enough, was a 2016 J22 World Champion. You know, I think one of the things Mike and I had been talking about over the past couple of days is that, you know, how excited he gets talking about the VX1. And you know, one of the big things with Lowell North was, you know, Lowell's Tigers, and a lot of our young guys and a lot of our young Tigers have been, you know, very much gravitated to the VX1. You know, Mike and our friend Jackson and Austin, along with Madeline Gill. I mean, just a lot of our young talented sailmakers are just like all up in it about going sailing VX1s and get very excited. Even some of our not so young folks, like maybe Chud Proctor, who you guys have probably seen out there crossing tacks on the race course. So obviously our group and Mike and his team are excited about sailing VX1s, and obviously we're going to be a little bit of ways from maybe getting the opportunity to get out and cross tacks a little bit, but he wanted to share some ideas and thoughts and keep people thinking about sailing. So last thing I wanted to bring up, while we got a whole bunch of people online and a whole bunch of VX1 sailors, and is the importance of supporting the class. And vx1.org is obviously your website for your class, and keeping up to date with your memberships and being an active member and associate member is easy to do with a couple clicks. Probably be missing a few regattas this spring. So it's a great time to make sure that the association knows that you're supporting them. So vx1.org will send that information out. Just make sure you're up to date on your memberships, and so when the boats are ready to hit the water, everybody can go out and be ready to hit the starting line. So Mike, thanks again for putting all this together. I know you've been working hard to try to come up with some great tips to kind of bring people up to date with how you've been going so fast. So maybe you can kind of dive right in and kind of share with what you've been thinking. Also, folks, again, there's the chat. So if you have some questions or some comments, feel free to type them right into the chat. And we have myself and Laura in the background kind of making sure that we get all that information to Mike.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing here, and you guys are going to have to bear with me a little bit. I've got the two-screen program going on, so when I've got everything on my larger screen that's to the right of me, just because it's easier for me to see it as well, and that's the screen that you guys are looking at the same time. So, you know, if I'm not looking directly at the camera, it's because I'm looking out to the right. So I think, though, the key here and the most important part about this is that, you know, the participation of you guys, because we want to make it as much as we could as if we're having this discussion on the dock. So I would, you know, definitely encourage as much as you possibly can everyone to, if you have a question, you know, put it into the group chat. We'll definitely get, we'll take some time to get through that stuff. I know I've already heard from a couple of other people, emails and stuff outside of it of questions as well that we'll try to cover. So, but to dive right into it, I think the key of the meeting here is to kind of leave with a little bit of a better understanding of, you know, sailing a VX1 upwind and what I'm actually looking for, because, you know, you can write everything that you possibly want to. You can, you know, you can put notes on everything. You can put pictures out, but actually seeing it and seeing it from the pictures on the water, I think is really really powerful. And I think the other piece on that is just letting everyone else in here. The other piece on that is I would encourage everyone to look at the photos from regattas. And I know it takes a little bit of time, and sometimes they're sifting through photos and that kind of stuff, but it's really actually very interesting. You can see so much, and yes, I know that in a lot of this, one photo doesn't give what happened totally at that time. It doesn't give the entire day of racing. But when you start to see things over and over in the photos. So to dive right into it, I have this picture of the start, and I think that was one of the most important pieces. This picture of the start and at the midwinters. And the thing when I look at this photo, what really shows to me when I see this is that one boat in my mind, or two or three boats, look different than all the others. And the phrase that I would use is they look settled, they look ready to go forward. And if I had this photo, let's say 2 minutes later, I would bet that those boats that were settled and ready and that look powered in this photo are the ones that are forward off the starting line. If we were to zoom in and look at it, we could probably say that, and this happens to be us in the middle of it, it happens to be Hayden and I in the middle of it, it's 269. You can see the boat is upright. Both crew are hiking out. The sails are trimmed in. It's not looking like this boat, which is tipping over. It's not looking like, there's other examples out here of other boats, ones where this boat with the jib is pretty wide open at this point right now, right off the starting line, or even up here where the jib is open. The boat looks powerful. And not only that, it's flat, and it is noticeably flatter than most of the other boats around in the starting photo. And that's where the crux of VX1 sailing upwind starts, in my opinion. It starts with sailing the boat flat, but that is also the hardest part about it, right? Is because in order to sail the boat flat, you have to ease the sails. And in order to ease the sails, you have to make them flat before you start easing them. So just this photo, there's an example looking like that's charging. So if we go to our next, photo here, another starting line photo again, let's look and just see what boats in this photo look like they're flat and charging off the line. We've got 270, 308. Those boats look flat, settled, like they're charging, they're powered up, ready to go. Chris here looks like he's powered up. He's a little bit heeled. He's going to get a little bit flatter soon, but he's ready to go. This boat in here, you can see they look like their bow is they're heeled over. 286 here, or I think that's 286. Looks like their jib's a little bit eased. They're sailing inside of the jib. They're luffing the front of the jib a little bit. They're probably getting squeezed from the boat to leeward. We go to weather here. I happen to know, I believe that is 269 there because of the mast, which is kind of ironic that on there is the tail. But you can see, again, the boat is settled. You can see the top of the head of the main looks flat because the boat is flat. It's not heeling over with the top of the main going down. So it's really critical that you see it over and over and over again. But what are these differences? And these aren't major differences. They're quite small differences, actually. So you've got this image right here, and I talk about this as in, what do we have? What are we looking at in this image, which is pretty straightforward. Of you have two boats here that look very similar. They look very similar, just sailing upwind. But when you start to look at the nuances of what's going on, you say, okay, well, 275 here, upwind, 12 knots. It's flatter. It looks flatter than 116 does, but also it looks like its sails are trimmed in more. So that starts to be this juxtaposition of, wait a second, we have to ease the sails to get the boat flatter, but it looks like both the jib and the main on 275 are tighter than they are on 116. And what does that come from? That comes from the vang in my mind. That comes from the boat being flat. That comes from the sails being flat is what that comes from. And so I think it's so important that when you start talking about how to sail the VX upwind, and what I'm actually looking for is that it comes down to the vang. And that is your most critical control to get the boat going and to get the sail flat enough. Everything else is you're adjusting rig tension to suit the vang. You're adjusting the main sheet to suit the to suit where you've pulled the vang onto to get the heel correct. So the vang is your major control. So when you look at this, you can see that yes, we're talking about minor differences, but those differences over the course of the race are what makes the change. And the number of times I get questions from people that say, oh, well, I thought I was flat on that upwind. But the key is that there's a huge difference between flat and flat. So I wanted to take a second here to go back to when I start to go back to one of the very first times that I was sailing the VX. And my first question is who exactly is actually driving this boat? Because I think actually Joanne is the only one looking remotely in the right direction, which I laugh at myself sometimes about these things that you see in photos when you should really be looking forward, right? But what you can see here, you can see just how deep the main is. The setup looks very similar to the other boats around. The main is deep. There's not a lot of luff tension. You've got a pretty deep section down here in the bottom. Same with 250 here. The setup's very similar. And for me, this was a year and a half ago, right? So for me, starting sailing the boat differently and actually changing the way I was moting it it took some time, but it was totally possible. And so going back and looking at it and saying, and kind of chuckling to yourself and saying, oh, well, that was how it used to be done, versus a totally different look of this off the line where you can see, again, boats charging, both people hiking. The leech is extremely tight here. You can see, if we zoom in, you can see the overbend wrinkles going from the spreaders about halfway through the windows. And when I say overbend wrinkles, that's those big wrinkles coming off the mast, those big wrinkles sitting there. And you can see them going from the spreaders halfway down to the boom. I'm always looking for those, always looking for those. If we go to other boats in the fleet and we zoom out a little bit here, what other boats are charging? Well, Bill, for sure, he's got the boat powered up. He's looking the wrong direction, but he's got the boat powered up. He's ready to go. The boat looks like it's flat. The sails are in. The leech looks tight. Everyone's hiking. Same thing on Chuck's boat. Boat is flat. Everyone's hiking, powered up. His overbend wrinkles, though, are going back all the way to the clew if we zoom in. So there might be something more to be gained there on his boat, which is an interesting way that I look at it. So we keep going through these and we say, okay, well, I've gotten to the point where I'm saying that you need to have the boat settled, you need to have it going fast. So how do you do that? And how is the vang and the rig tension, and how are those related? And I say the vang is the most important thing. So when I say the vang is the most important thing, it really has to do with these overbend wrinkles. And when I sail upwind in the VX, I pull the main in as hard as I can, and I try to get the boat flat. And you can see I'm working to get the boat as flat as I possibly can. My back is almost dragging in the water. And if the boat isn't flat and I have to ease the main, and I have to, when the puff hits more than 1.5 feet from wherever my normal mode is, if I have to ease it 4 feet, and then when the puff goes away, I have to trim it back on 4 feet, I know I don't have enough vang. So my go-to move is to pull the vang and get the boat flat, and then start trimming the main based on heel angle. So I'm really working to just trim the main based on heel angle and get the boat entirely flat with the vang. But what happens, right? You look in this photo, you can see overbend wrinkles going back a little ways in the boat. But what happens? Well, how many times have you guys been going upwind and seen a photo that looks like this, where you have overbend wrinkles going all the way through to the back of the sail? So what's happening here? It looks, this person's sailing with 2 people, right? So they're probably 390 pounds, 380 pounds, something like that. The boat's a little bit heeled over. They need that amount of vang to get the boat flat. But what's happening here is when you see these overbend wrinkles, you're seeing the bottom part of the mast getting basically bent too far forward, and the sail is getting pulled away. The sail is getting pulled out of here. And it's interesting here is that you can see this stripe looks really flat, but as you get up here, this stripe starts to look like there's some depth. And I'm sure if I could see further up in this photo, this stripe would look even deeper. So what's happening here? We're pulling on the vang to get the boat flat. We're bending the mast, but we're bending the mast unevenly. So we're bending the bottom too much. And in bending the bottom too much, you're flattening out the bottom of the main, but you're never flattening the top of it. So you have this huge amount of depth in the top of the main. And that amount of depth in the top of the main is actually just making it so that the upper leech is engaged. So when the puff hits, you have to ease 4 feet. You have to ease, 3 feet, and then you have to bring all that main sheet back in. And how can anyone go through 4, 5, 6 feet of main sheet when you're going upwind unless you're really used to going through that kind of main sheet? But if you were to tighten the rig, if you were to tighten the D's and the checks here, even if it's, just in your ratio, your normal ratio of tightening, you're probably going to will end up with a straighter mast down here for the same vang. But the way the mast works, if it's straighter down here and you keep the tension on the vang the same, that bend is going to be pushed up higher in the mast. So it's going to get even further up. And what that's going to do is that's going to flatten out the top part of the main without flattening out the bottom as much. You're going to more evenly distribute through it. So if you can flatten out the top part of the main, what ends up happening is you end up with a sail that is easier to open at the top. So when the puff hits, half of the job of letting the main twist off is done by the main itself. It's done by the actual flatness in the sail, and the square top head just allows it to open. It's not done by you with the main sheet having to ease the sheet and get the main out. So it's really important here, and it's just so critical in this boat to be able to get this right. So I pull the vang on to get the boat flat, and then I look at my overbend wrinkles, and I always say you just change the rig for what the look is. You're not changing the rig for any other reason other than what the look of the sail is, and that falls in line with, as it gets up in wind speed, we want more tension on the D's and on the checks. And that means more tension on the caps too, because we move them up in the ratio. We want more tension on the D's and the checks, and that straightens the bottom part of the mast. So it takes the pressure from the vang and pushes it into the top part of the sail.
So, hey, Mike, can I weigh in here real quick? It's Brian.
Yep.
So, and I think that's great, because I think you've done a great job of explaining the cause and effect of what's going on, right? I mean, so if you could just pop back to that one in basically inverted main there, when you kind of see stuff like that, you'd seen the early, the 2018 edition of Mike Marshall with the the 1960s deep mainsail earlier on. What's your trigger? You're mentioning that you want these overbend wrinkles. Is that the entire focus, to make sure that the lower third of the main is set up so those overbend wrinkles in whatever condition are about halfway back through the window? I mean, if you can get that right all the time, are you going to be in the ball game?
Exactly. That's exactly it. So my goal is to get it correct. My goal is that throughout the entire wind range, it is to get those overbend wrinkles to be going about 50% of the way back through the window, in light air, heavy air, everything. And for me, that takes this what is the witchcraft of someone sticking their finger up in the air and going, I think it's 14.5 knots. I should do one turn here, one turn there on the rig. It's much more of a, the sail doesn't look right. And I'm not too worried that I should be one step down because the tuning guide says I should be one step down. I'm more worried about saying, okay, I need these overbend wrinkles to be going 50% of the way back. And if it's very light, I'm going to need less tension on the rig so that my main sheet and the actual, the leach tension is what's pulling the mast back, and that's what bends the bottom of the main and the bottom of the mast. And that's what creates the overbend wrinkles when I have less tension. And then as I have more tension, I need to have more steps up on the shrouds so that I can actually allow allow that bend and force that bend higher. Does that kind of answer what you were asking?
Oh, for sure. I think that's really important too. I think the idea of being able to force the bend up the mast and how it affects, how much vang you can put on and how it affects the hounds and all that stuff. And once you start over bending the mast in the lower section, not only do you obviously lose all the power in that sail area, right? I mean,
Exactly.
From the sail designer standpoint, but it's having a big effect on everything. It's the domino effect, right? It's you get the head stay tight enough, it's the top of this main getting too full for the conditions and all those kind of things. So I think the way you explained it, how being able to progress that bend up into the mast, and if you see something like you have on the screen right now, boy, you probably better do something about making a change. And real quick, I think, Mike, you mentioned earlier about how often you go back and look at pictures from regattas. And
Yeah.
I know you're big into that. And I think that's a great opportunity for other folks who are maybe struggling with their tuning and struggling with trying to find the right fit, is to go find pictures of yourself and see, like you said, you think you have it right. And then you see a picture of yourself like these three boats. Maybe not quite exactly what we would be looking for a setup. Would you agree?
Yeah, so exactly. So, and this is just an idea. This is just to show a little bit more of the opposite side, right? So we had our first photo, which is overbend wrinkles all the way back. And if you talk to anyone that sailed with me, when I get out to the race course, the first thing that I do is I pull the main in, I get the boat flat, I, ease the main until the boat's in the right heel angle for whatever it is, or trim it in. I pull the vang on to the amount. If I'm easing the main, I pull more vang on. If I'm got the main pretty trimmed, I don't pull that much vang on. If I do that, then the next step is to look up at the main. And if my main looks like this, the first thing I'll do is I'll say, okay, put this number on the checks, this number on the on the D's, and this number on the caps, and whatever those numbers are, I'll take a guess at how much it needs to go up, right? And we'll turn downwind, we'll put it on, and then we'll turn back upwind and change it. Or if I don't see any overbend wrinkles, I'll do entirely the opposite, and I'll take some turns off. And it's much more of a fluid way of looking at it. You put the turns on, go back upwind. If it looks good, we're good. If it doesn't look good, change it again. So this photo is a little bit of the opposite. Go ahead. Oh.
No, I was just going to say, Mike, somebody just put on the Walter picture you had up, what would your change be? And I think that you just answered that perfectly. Your timing, insofar as making sure the rig gets tight enough so that basically the mast stops inverting in the lower section more than anything else. So
yeah,
I think that answered that question.
Exactly. For me, not knowing where they are in the range, you'd at least have another 4 turns on the seeing how big this is, you'd at least have another 3 turns on the D's, which would mean you'd probably have 6 on the caps, and you'd probably have a half or 1 on the checks. And this, just looking at this photo, is what I would, but that would be the dart at the wall, right? But I would have to do it and then turn back upwind and see. I think that's the key. That's the key, is going back upwind, checking your numbers, checking your work. So the opposite end of the spectrum is this, where we've got 3 boats in the frame here, and the sail setup looks identical to all of them, actually. You've got very similar wrinkles in each one coming out right down here. But these are not overbend wrinkles. See how those are just sort of short wrinkles that come off the mast? Those are tension from the luff tape. So you put tension on the luff tape when you build the sail so that the luff retracts back up the mast when you let the Cunningham off a little bit. And it also helps to, find out the entry. But basically, these aren't overbend wrinkles. So these are very deep sails. And you can see just how deep the stripes are in the sails in all of them. And then the question becomes, what would you expect the attitude of the boat would be? Well, with deep sails that are trimmed in, I would expect the boats to be heeling over. And if I look at this photo, I can see the bottom, the weather side of the bottom on every one of these boats. Is that to say when these guys are on the boat, do they feel, these guys and gals are on the boat, do they feel like they are healed? Probably not. It probably doesn't feel like they're all that healed. But when you look at the photos, you start to really see that the boats are. And this is one of those cases where more Vang, this is probably, you don't need to ease the rig. This is probably, we need to pull the Vang tighter on all of these boats and just pull it harder and harder and harder. And I've got some examples of that later, because you can again see that there's just not flat enough sails. So this is the example.
Mike, real quick on the VX, if you could just go back,
Yeah.
if you look at the luff on the mains, do you tend to get a lot of backwind? Do you find a lot of backwind if the main is too deep? I mean, it's looking like that sail's starting to behave like it's getting a little bit of backwind, and a lot of people's instinct might be, well, we should ease the jib or something like that. But I think your point of, getting back to a flatter sail plan profile is probably the solution to what's going on there.
100%, and you do get backwind, and yes, you don't want this much backwind, and the answer could be to ease the jib, but until you have the main flat, there's no reason to ease the jib, because it's the main depth that is inverting and not, and not the jib doing it.
Gotcha. And a real quick question before you dive into the next question up is basically somebody curious how many turns to go up or down, tightening or loosening to the leeward shrouds, or just slack a good starting point. And it doesn't sound like you're as much focused on the numbers as the aesthetic of what you're trying to make the sail look like. Would that be?
Yeah, my ratio, if I had to give a ratio of what it is, I tend to be 2 turns on the 2 turns on the caps, 1 on the lowers, and potentially probably every second step like that, I would do a half a turn on the checks. So that's pretty much, if that answers that question, that's the ratio. And I'm looking, and that tends to make it so that the leeward upper going upwind is just going slack, and the when you pull the Vang on, the overband wrinkles are going halfway, halfway through they're going from the spreaders, and they're defined wrinkles from the spreaders halfway through the main window. That's
and just for a layman, for somebody who doesn't have a lot of VX1 experience, in that type of condition, what are you looking? I mean, a lot of different boats, a lot of different, whether J24, Lightning, Star, they're looking for the leeward shroud to act a particular way. Are you looking for them to start
just going
consistently
slack?
The same between the same between the two of them, or does the lower go looser quicker? What are your viewpoints on that?
The lower will never, when you're in breeze in the VX, the lower will never, the D and the check will never get loose going upwind, because the Vang tension will be keeping them tight. But the cap shroud will get loose. The cap shroud will just start.
So your caps will start to dance a fraction. And if they don't dance at all and you're in 12 or 14 knots of breeze, maybe you're
potentially too tight.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
great,
exactly.
Thanks.
So the interesting thing here is now we have a photo going upwind. The difference here between flat, when I really try to put it in, is flat. The boat is flat. And, if we were to zoom in on the telltales here, we've got lifted telltales, and we've got maybe a touch of backwind in the front of the jib. And if we were to go to that next photo, wherever it is. Okay, that's next photo is being, well, a next photo didn't want to come up, so we'll go to that next photo on its own. If we were to, we'll get to this. Come on, there we go. Okay, so if we were to go to this photo, flat is flat. You can't see any of the weather hull on this boat. And what that's doing is that's allowing the boat, if you were to look at it from the stern, it's very flat on the stern. That's allowing the boat to sit on the leeward chine of the two of them. It's a little more rounded in the stern, so there's aren't really hard chines, but it's allowing the boat to sit on the leeward chine. Now, I had a question a little bit earlier. I had a question yesterday about the 18-foot skiffs. People were watching those going upwind. And this is interesting because those boats and 49ers sail very heel to weather. but they sail heel to weather because they're trying to allow the boat to sit on the weather chine, like you would do in a Lightning or any other similar boat. They're allowing the boat to sit on the weather chine. They also don't have a lot of drag. They don't have a bulb that they're keeping around below the boat. They have trapezes. They have a lot of riding moment. Maybe there's a potential for that in the VX to find it, but I would bet that the key is the groove gets very narrow when you sail that way in a boat with the drag of a bulb underneath and the weight of a bulb. So it's probably going to be quite a bit harder to find the groove in this. What they are preparing for is they're also preparing for the next puff. Because if you can get the boat really flat, like heel to weather flat, when the puff hits, the boat only goes upright. It doesn't sort of heel to leeward, and the mast is very vertical. So they're just preparing for the next puff. So they either go from slightly heel to weather to dead upright to slightly heel to weather to dead upright, as opposed to going leeward heel flat, leeward heel flat. And those are the two differences. But the key here is just how flat the boat is. Second thing to look at, it's hard to see the jib, but jib is not luffing at all along the edge. Even when I go all the way up to the top, and this jib is pretty eased, it isn't even luffing at the top. Telltales are straight. The bow is down. The boat is going as fast as I can make it go without reaching. I'm just on the edge of not going upwind anymore. And then overbend wrinkles distinctly coming out of the spreaders, going down. You can see them going into the main window, and you can see that they come down at that angle and they end right in the middle of the boom.
That's a great pick, I think, Micah, of where you kind of want those set up. There's two quick questions that I think you could probably blast off pretty quick. And one is, in this particular picture, what percent of max vang have you pulled? Well, is there such a thing as maximum vang? And then, and how much do you think you have on there? I can see a little bit of deflection. And
yeah,
then,
if you get your ruler out, I think you can see the boom spending. Which, if anyone on here is a photo of a more bent boom in a VX, then let me know. That's how much vang's on there. It is,
which is pretty interesting, because it doesn't look like it's honking by any stretch of the imagination. You're kind of in 12, 8, 10, 12 knots of breeze, and you've got that thing stepped up pretty tight on the vang and the leech.
It's a little more than 8 here. It's probably 12, 13, something like that. This was the VX, the midwinters this year. But that vang is, when I say pull the vang hard, it is boom bending hard. And it is, when the block is sideways, I break the block on the, I pull the block apart, the little one that sits right here on the end of the shoe. When it's not sitting right, you pull it apart.
Before we get to Rich's question, well, actually, let's do that one real quick, because he's asking about the GNAV and about setting up before the start, and you're trying to get your overbend wrinkles right. Do you always do it on starboard because of the way that the GNAV, or it doesn't really matter because you're more looking up a third, up towards the spreader window, or insofar as overbend wrinkles?
So that's a really good question. What you're looking for in overbend wrinkles, they tend to fall to windward, above the GNAV. They tend to fall in that location. They tend to basically be spreaders down through the window. And so I could do it on either. I can do it on either tack. It really ends up being that you come off, you round the committee boat to check in on your way out to the race course, and you head off on starboard. So it ends up being on starboard. But for sure, you can still see it on either tack and in this setup.
Yeah, it's pretty glaring in that particular picture as well. And real quick, can I ask a quick question about the vang, and how often you use that for gear changing? Like you're in, like you said, 12 to 13 right now. If it lightens up to 8 or 9, is one of your first steps to the vang, or what's your process there?
So with small wind changes, the first step that I have is, as you can see, the main sheet's in my hand. And we were talking about this earlier, and you had asked, do you know how far out you are on the main sheet? And I said, I have no idea. I couldn't tell you how far out I am on the main sheet. And if you look at this photo, we're fully hiked, and I'm, 8 inches away from the actual top bridle block. But the boom is not going up when it leaves that, when it's being eased. So the leech is tight, but I'm just easing the main sheet to keep the boat flat based on what I feel in the rail. And we're going to talk about feel a little bit more later on. But I think the answer to your question, the first move is pull the main sheet in to keep the boat when you get at the lighter spot, and pull it until it stops essentially. And really, once you've gotten there, that's when, and you're in that for quite some time, that's when you can start thinking about the need to maybe let the vang off. But the vang in most cases is actually helping you keep the boat powered up, because while it is flattening the bottom of the main, it's engaging the leach a lot. And so you really tend to start to let the vang off in big gear changes when you have a big drop in breeze and you actually need to open the leach of the main and
Gotcha.
actually let it breathe a little more.
So basically the boat has to get pretty sticky before you start thinking about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then Kelly Pike has a quick question. Jib clue is hooked high, correct?
Jib clue, yeah, I think it's on it was pretty flat water, so it's on either the third hole from the top or fourth hole from the bottom, or it's one of those two middle holes where it's sitted. I think it's on the fourth hole from the bottom right now, I believe, and third hole from the top might be the same thing, but it's one of those two where it is. But the reason it looks like it's up is because the jib is actually eased a good amount here, even though the blocks look like they're very close to each other. The jib is actually eased because we're in enough breeze, and we were 380 pounds. We're in enough breeze that easing, you can see how much it's eased up here on the top, that I needed to ease, in easing the main this much, we needed to have Hayden ease the jib in order to not be backing it into the main. And the feeling that I have for that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just not to create a stall. No, that makes perfect sense for sure. Keep the boat driving forward, right?
Exactly. And if I ever get the feeling that the boat feels like I put the bow down and it doesn't accelerate, the first thing I do, if I kept it flat and kept it going, the first thing I do is I ease the jib a little bit, just to crack, just uncleat it and cleat it again, kind of ease. But that's the first thing that I go for. When I ever feel like I put the bow down and the boat just doesn't free up and get going. So, any other questions on that for now?
And actually, it's a good question. Well, someone's asking the ratio between easing the jib and letting the jib traveler down. And how often are you more sheet twisty versus kind of, making an adjustment to?
Sorry, I said that incorrectly then. I was thinking traveler and sheet being one and the same in this setup. We were traveler down, and that's my first go-to. My first go-to is traveler down, which is because I'm keeping and that's in a time when you're trying to match the leach profiles of the main and the jib. And the more you ease the main, the more you have to ease the jib. And you get to a certain point where when you ease the main, the top starts to open even a little bit more. And that's the point when you have to start easing the jib sheet. And that tends to happen that I go jib traveler down first. And then I maybe every so often when I go jib traveler down first, I might just take the jib sheet and uncleat it and cleat it again. Because with a high aspect jib like this, the jib sheet does so much to the actual location of the leach that, as I said before, anytime that I feel sticky, I've got that traveler down to keep from backing into the main. But if I put the bow down, the boat doesn't free up, it's generally because the slot's too narrow and I just can't get the boat going forward is really the key.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think you mentioned about how the high aspect jib, right? And the small incremental changes you make to a little bit of twist with the sheet. You're probably not easing the thing 3 inches. You're easing it a half an inch or 3/4 of an inch just to get that boat going forward again.
Right. So we talk about breeze, we talk about vang, but the opposite is true in light air. I'm still looking for those overbent bingles to be 50% of the way, back in the window of the main. I'm still looking for that. I'm still trying to, I might have some vang on in order to just engage the leach of the main. But the key, I think, in light air is trimming the main sheet harder. And you can see just how hard 222 is trimming the main here, and that the top of their main actually is not even closed yet. And you can see, and what has it done to their boat? This boat has someone, the top of their main is wide open. They've got someone moved in off the rail, and they've only got 2 people on board. They've got someone moved in off the rail, and the boat's a little bit flat. They're clearly underpowered. This boat is, they should be able to hike against that. Their boat's already heeling over. They should be able to hike against that. That main is in. You can see the power. You can see the way the boat looks like it's driving itself into the water is really important. It's same thing with the boat in front. Main sheet's trimmed. Top is a little bit open still. You could probably go even harder, but everyone there can hike. At that point, that boat can be flatter. You can start to press against the keel and start to actually, flatten the boat out and make the keel work for you. So I think that the key is that in big breeze, you're easing with the bang on, but the same thing is true in light air, that trimming the main and getting that depth in the main and getting the extra depth, but not making the bottom so deep that the top is way open and the bottom, as you can see right here, is really deep, making it so you can trim the sail really hard to get the roll moment from the head of the main and actually get the boat heeled over so that you can hike against it is really critical in light air.
So are those teams hiking hard enough, Mike?
And not at all. It should be. I remember this condition really well, and I remember it really, really well. And this photo was taken at a very similar time as that photo was taken, and that is the difference in those races. And that is just from maintaining that leach on the main and being able to keep the boat powered.
Gotcha. So 2 quick ones here, Mike, while give you a little break here. But Jim Thompson's asking, when you run out of vang throw, like you bottomed out, tube locked, do you adjust the line at the top of the boom, or it's rigged too loose? What are if you run out of vang throw, what do you do?
I panic and call Hayden.
Have you ever run out of vang throw? Yeah.
No, because I've been lucky enough to be able to sail boats that are awesome, and that's Jeff Iber and Hayden Bennett those are the 2 boats that I've been able to sail, and I haven't run out of vang throw. But what that means is you do have to maintain that you have to maintain that, and you have to shorten the lines, and you have to do the splices so that you actually can make sure you can get maximum vang throw. When you get in the boat at the dock, you should have, the vang should be tight enough that it is a little bit difficult to get the shoe onto the boom when you're at the dock with the sail going. And that's how you have enough, you're gonna have enough throw in the vang. That's what it always seems on those boats where I do have enough throw, is that it's not impossible, but you kind of have to make sure you pull all the line out of the end of the vang in order to get it on.
That's a good tip and something you can do, without wind, right? I mean, that's something you can set up and make sure is right before you drop the boat in the water. And Kelly's got a quick question about batten tension. How important is your batten tensions in light air?
I'm on
much?
Not a whole lot. I'm a little bit more on the simple is better, which I put the battens, I try to make the battens so that when I'm sitting on the dock on land, I can push them. I can just have enough tension on them so that when I push on the side of the batten, it will just pop from one side to the other. If half of it pops to one side, you need to put another turn on, but the whole length of it should pop just ever so slightly from one side or the other when I'm sitting at the dock when the sail's down. And I'm on the boat tightening them on, and that tends to be a pretty good batten tension. So the last point, and hitting it home again, it's heel angle, and it's jib telltales. And again, this is another example of, you can see that all the boats in this photo, the difference in the heel angle compared to the alternative, which is flat. And the key here is that the number of times I hear, yeah, I was flat, I was sailing the boat flat, but flat isn't flat. When you sail it flat, it should almost feel like it's awkwardly flat, like the boat wants to fall over on top of you. Like it wants to, like it wants to be heeled to weather. You think it's heeling to weather, but it's not even flat then. That's really the key that we're talking about. And the other thing here, zooming in, these guys are doing it well, is they're sailing with straight jib telltales. Again, if you're pinching in this boat and you're pinching to lose, to get the boat flat, you're just not going fast enough through the water. And we've got an example of this here. Again, very heeled over boat, sails are very trimmed in. We're luffing the inside of the jib here. You're starting to see the jib backwind right at that stripe, and the boat just isn't flat, and it just isn't going upwind. And so for this situation, it would be, ease the main sheet, pull the vang on more, even more, and get that boat flat, and then sail with straight telltales. And what will happen is that the first time you sail with straight telltales, you'll say, "Oh, I'm losing height. I'm losing height," and you feel like you're sliding into the boat's to leeward of you. But as the boat accelerates, the keel works better, the keel works faster, and the lift starts being generated off the foil. And as your boat accelerates, you start to lose height, you start to gain that height back. You start to slide sideways less than the boat next to you. And so that means that you are matching their angle, but you're just going faster than them. You might be pointing down towards them, but you're not sliding sideways as much as they are. And that means that you're still maintaining your distance away from them, but you're just going faster than they are through the water. Similar example here, going through it. Again, we've got very deep sails. We've got boat heeled over, and we've got not a lot of main sheet twist, right? Again, vang on tight, really, these are just, every picture is a snapshot in time, but when you, as I said before, when you see it over and over again, it's so critical to start to really think about it and really think about what flat is in these boats.
So Mike, quick question, and you can probably maybe go back. You saw that jib kind of bubbled up, so obviously we weren't having the telltale stream back and loaded up. But question about jib luff tension, and what are you looking for insofar as, a hint of wrinkles? When do you start pulling that jib luff smooth? What's your trigger for that?
I'm looking for, in lighter air, a hint of wrinkles, but as soon as I have to start pulling the vang on, it's enough to get the wrinkles out. And then when I get into really, really breezy situations, it will be, probably a significant amount more than that to be tight on the luff of the jib. But I have found that you can be too tight in breeze, where you just start to get this knuckle right in the front of the jib. And that knuckle right in the front of the jib means it's really hard to drive the boat. So it's, my in lighter air, it's just ever so slight wrinkles. And then as the breeze comes on, it's, no wrinkles anymore to, firm on it. And then, but never really turn downwind and pull it as hard as you possibly can. It's certainly not that tight.
Fair enough. So I mean, basically once you're able to start putting some pressure on the weather rail, having that kind of aesthetically smooth is a good starting point. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So then, going back to it, I said I was going to touch on feel. And the real question is how should the boat feel when it is correct? And we've got this photo here. Again, we're seeing none of the hull, seeing the hull on this boat. We're seeing, if we zoom in on the telltales, the jib isn't backing, the telltales are going straight. But you also look that I'm not actually looking that much at the telltales. I'm looking forward. So what is it that's telling me how to drive this boat? And I've got the main sheet in my hand. I could be hiking harder. Thank you, Joanne, for keeping the boat flat, because I'm clearly not doing it. But basically, again, you see the boom bending, but I'm feeling the pressure of the rail underneath me. And what does that mean? That means that when the rail falls away, I'm trimming the main in a half, 6 inches, a foot, whatever's needed to keep the rail pressured. When the rail starts to push against me, I'm easing the main to keep the boat flat. At that point, when I have the vang on, I'm not looking up at the main anymore. I'm not looking that much at the telltales. I'm keeping the bow down, the telltales straight, and I'm just sailing the boat to the main sheet, to what that heel and what that pressure on the rail is. What does the rudder feel like? maybe a slight bit of weather rudder, but certainly not much. But the key is that the boat feels loose. It feels like when I turn the rudder, the bow wants to turn whichever way I turn it to. I'm not fighting the rudder. Back here, you can see the waves coming off the rudder. You can see that the rudder is being fought. You can see that something's going wrong there. Again, you can see what's going on. But the key to sailing the boat this way and sailing the boat flat is that for your crew, and this goes for everyone in the class, the crew needs to find a place where they're comfortable hiking, whether that's in further than Joanne is or out further than Joanne is, that they can stay for 3 to 4 minutes. And the key with staying 3 to 4 minutes is if I'm sailing the boat relative to what the rail's doing, and someone leans in to readjust their hiking position, they lean in, they move their shoulders from here all the way into here. And that totally unbalances the side of the boat. The pressure in the rail, I'm not only having to deal with the pressure in the rail from the breeze, but I'm having to deal with the pressure in the rail from the crew weight changing. So what does that say? Oh, hike harder. Well, I can't hike no one can hike all the way out straight leg unless you're training for an Olympic campaign. You can hike all the way out straight leg for the 25 minutes upwind. You don't have to. Move in, find a place where you're comfortable hiking for 3 to 4 minutes at a time and just stay there, because it just makes it so much easier on the boat to balance it and keep the boat going upwind. Again, here you can see bending boom too. So a lot of, they're sailing 3 up, bending the boom again in that situation. Very interesting.
So that's you and Joe and Madeline, I think. Is that at the North Americans last year?
Correct. I was at the North Americans last year.
I think that really for me, especially someone who is getting a little bit longer in the tooth, is your point about finding a really good, comfortable position that you can maintain. Because with this boat, as you were explaining to me earlier, is that, someone's hiked out and then they start hopping their butt around to change and switch feet and stuff. That has such a dramatic effect on what you're feeling when you try to drive it through a straight line. And being able to keep it on a consistent angle of heel, I mean, you have plenty of opportunities, if dumping a little more main sheet if a puff comes through. But if you have to do that because someone slides in because, they need to scratch themselves or something,
Exactly.
It changes everything for your driving perspective. So get a good comfortable spot. Yeah. Really, really good tip, I think.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of wrap up here because we've gone a little bit longer. And, if you guys have other questions, definitely put them out and message them in. But I wanted to wrap up back with this photo. And it's the last photo in it. And, the keys here is that this looks different. This boat looks different. And the key here is, why does it look different? And it looks different because what's actually happening is the vang is on, everyone's hiked, the heel angle is flat, the telltales are straight. And you can't stress it enough that in light air, heavy air, overbend wrinkles 50% of the way back, your vang is your main control. You pull the vang on as hard as you can, get the, in breeze. In lighter air, you pull it on a little bit less. Trim that main sheet in, you're either looking for power or you're trimming the main sheet really hard until you stall the top telltale. And I challenge you to stall the top telltale on the main, because I haven't really been able to find it yet, the place where I stall the top telltale on the main. Pull it in, keep the boat powered up in big breeze. You're easing the main sheet once you have the sails flat. So the order of operations are, we need to sail the boat flat. That means we need to ease the sails, but we can't ease the sails until we have the sails flat. And once we have the sails flat, then we can ease them. Same thing in light air. We need to trim the sails hard. We can't just make the bottom of the main super deep to be able to get power. We have to keep the bottom of the main a little bit flat. We have to ease the rig off a little bit. And then the last piece on it, we have to keep the telltale straight, because you could do everything else right. And if you sail the boat too high, you're just going slower than the boats around you. And I say to a lot of people a lot is I can point, speed is king. I can point at the weather mark, but I'm not going to get there before you if I'm sitting on the starting line pointing at the weather mark luffing. That's really the biggest thing on it, that speed is king. Keep the bow down, keep the boat going fast, flatten the sails out when you are going fast so that it makes your job easier for the whole process. So,
Great.
Brian, do we
So,
get any other questions?
yeah, so that's obviously, I've learned a lot about making a VX1 go fast, and obviously nobody better than you to explain that, Mike. There is a quick question, which is more about more manufacturing, I guess, more than anything else. The question is, are all the North Mains made so far the same? And I think that might go a little bit to your wheelhouse about design and some of the changes we've made over the past however many years we've been involved with working with the class. What are your thoughts on that? Other than the fact that you get the worst one usually, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends. It depends how far back you're talking about. But in the last year or two, they've been the same. That's there haven't been major updates and changes. I've been really happy with the way the boat's been going, and for sure, there's nothing different on any one boat, including ours, that anyone else has. Those are all. They're all. In fact, you could talk to Jerry Callahan. I switched mains with him at one point. So, but yeah, it was, and for sure they've been very stable, and they're probably going to continue to be very stable.
Gotcha. Well, it's still fun. It's still fun, obviously, to tweak with designs, Mike. Right? I mean, that's your forte. You love kind of looking at new shapes and seeing if you can learn something new. And obviously, if you have the opportunity to come up with something that's original and innovative, you're not gonna stop working on that. That's kind of the fun part of our job, for sure. A quick question from Paul Murphy. He's asking about in 8 to 14 knots, how much time do you want bearing off to accelerate? Assume you have some sort of a decent hole to put the bow down into it. And I guess maybe I would add to that, how deep do you want to go to get the thing going? When do you know that trigger point if you're putting the bow down too far and the boat's just going to lean over, or you're going to ease too much main? Where's that kind of that speed shot that you're looking for? How much room do you need?
One thing before that, to answer your previous one, is yes, we're always working on new things. If you talk to the guys in the Newport fleet, we've had test sails come out to try to be faster and always move forward and always be faster. So that's for sure definitely a critical piece of it, and it goes with all of it. But to answer Paul's question, in a sort of rudimentary way, I'm always accelerating. How long is the acceleration point? It's always, what is the answer of what is your top speed or what is your speed that you're aiming for when you're going upwind? I don't really have one. I'm accelerating to the point, I'm accelerating as much as the boat can with straight telltales. Luffing the telltales on the windward side, because you're pinching when you're looking to get the boat going fast, is worse, but not that much worse than luffing them on the leeward side. Luffing them on the leeward side is also a form of stall. It's a form of the sail, the breeze stalling across the sail. So you can't go to the point where you're luffing a leeward telltale, because that means that the boat, that the wind is stalled across there. But the thing to remember, if you're going really slow and you put the bow down, what ends up happening is you end up actually stalling the leeward telltale for maybe 3 or 4 seconds as the boat accelerates, because as the boat accelerates, the apparent wind goes forward, and then that flow reattaches to the leeward side of the sail. So I think that's a really important, important piece on it. To answer Paul's question in more real terms, probably off the line, I'm accelerating for 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, something like that. If I'm already going, if I'm not fully stopped, if I'm fully stopped, I'm accelerating for 20 seconds. So it's a very variable piece.
So, and maybe this is a different topic for a different time. How much are you relying on your crew, on your team, kind of helping you with that? And by that, I mean, are you kind of looking for information like, okay, we're back up to speed, we're faster, we're lower, we're higher? Do you get that kind of input from your team, or does that vary on where you are in the race course?
100%. I absolutely, I can see it. As a driver, you have the blessing and curse of being able to see the boat to leeward of you, because if you're losing boat legs to them, it's very painful. If you're not, it's certainly feels pretty good, right? I'm beating that guy, but that's, it kind of is what it is. But I definitely rely on the crew and anyone who sail with me. I'm looking for puff calls. I'm looking for waves. I'm looking for, boats to weather, what's happening with boats to weather. And certainly right off the line and coming into marks, that my attention is on making the boat go as fast as I possibly can. Once I get clear of this group, you can see what boats are going to get kind of clear of this situation. Once you get clear of it, then I can stop making sure I'm going at 100% speed. I'm still trying to be at 99% speed, but I can start to look at the other pieces. Being fast upwind makes you look really smart as a tactician. So, it's so critical.
So there's only one more question here before we kind of wrap up. We're into this, well, almost nearly for an hour or so, and it is a Friday afternoon, and even though we're doing a bunch of social distancing, we still want to spend some time with our families. So there is a question about how do you repeat your Vang setting after rounding the leeward mark? Is there some sort of repeatable thing that you're obviously conditions may have changed, stuff like that, but what are you kind of targeting for going into that leeward mark?
That's a great question. Where is that photo gone?
It's from Brian Shores.
Yeah, where did that, there it is. Let's see how we repeat our Vang setting. There's that little white thing right there on the boom, right where the Vang is. And that little white thing has that's the little nurse sails white dashed marker that actually shows it's got numbers on it. And that is my repeating. I basically look at where the shoe falls on that setting. I don't know where that is relative to anyone else's on the boat. So I couldn't tell you that I sail around at 2.5. I do sail around at 2.5, but that's just 2.5 on there. But that's how I repeat it. It's that white mark. I've got one on the same weight, the same space back on either side. So the numbers line up.
Gotcha. So just repeatable, just like almost every other setting on the boat, right? You want to be able to make sure if you're going fast, you look at it and make sure that you can repeat it the next time, right?
Exactly.
Well, Michael, obviously this is you've touched on a lot of points and done a great job of getting a bunch of pictures together and organizing this in pretty short order. So obviously appreciate you putting all the effort in and sharing with everybody. There's more opportunity, obviously, as we move forward over the next couple of months to share more ideas. If anybody has topics or ideas they'd like to see Mike cover in our next VX1 chat, email them to him. I think that sort of comes with this Zoom software. They can email you direct questions, Mike.
Yep.
And so obviously that would be great. Someone's already mentioned they might want to talk about downwind next time. And obviously there's huge gains to be made downwind sailing fast, the VX1. A quick reminder for everybody before everybody hops off, vx1.org is a great time right now that you're all hyped up and talking about VX1 sailing to go on and renew your class dues and join as a full member or as an associate. Sort of kick off your weekend for doing the right thing for the class. So, Mike, anything else you got that we want to wrap up?
No, I think that's it. Thanks thanks everyone for coming, and super happy to do this, and really excited that if everyone enjoyed it, we be able to do more in the future now that because we can't get out there right now, but we can at least look at photos and talk about it. So it'll be fun.
All right, everybody. On behalf of the entire North Sales team, be safe. Take care of your families, and we will be chatting with you soon.